Hi, this is Lenny Nuccio with Bottom Line Results, and I'm here with Larry Cabaldon, President and CEO of Board Performance Group, and thanks for joining us today, Larry.
My pleasure.
And Larry, you've done a lot of powerful work with working with company boards,
Mm-hmm.
not only in the church community, but in the business community, and you've had the experience to work with hundreds of consultants.
Yes.
And how, have you been able to actually measure how their consulting works and how their pricing is and how effective their consulting actually is?
Mm-hmm. Well, what happens is, as I may have mentioned to you earlier, I ran the executive search practice for PricewaterhouseCoopers, so I was also responsible for hiring all the consultants. Mm-hmm. Also, we had a major project for Deloitte and Touche, where we, for 4 years, hired all of their consultants. And then I've been involved with McKinsey consultants and others, where my responsibility was to really work with the board and the executive team for assessment purposes. Now, as a result of all of that, what happens is I got a very good view of the effectiveness of consulting projects, because we're dealing with ARCO, Security Pacific, Paramount Studios. So when you sit down with the CEO, CFO, and then with the board, and then lately in the last few years, investors, you can really hear the truth about what they think about the consulting assignments that have been accomplished.
And have you found that some of the consultants really weren't worth a whole lot?
Well, it varies. Like if you're talking about IT consultants or operational consulting and technical consulting, it's pretty easy sometimes to measure that.
Sure.
But if you're talking about kind of the softer consulting, like strategic planning, change management, team building, then it gets a little bit more iffy about whether the clients are getting the results that they expected.
And that can be very disheartening and expensive.
Well, it is. It is. And so what happens is if you look at the criteria for consulting, and we talk to boards and so forth, usually what they'll do is look at the qualifications of the consultant, background and everything else. But what they don't really focus on is what the bottom line results are for the project. And so, and this is what I get, sitting with board members and investors, they're saying, okay, what are we actually paying for?
Sure.
So the criteria that they've come up with is they want some winning results. And sometimes the consultants will talk about what the ultimate results are, because you're paying money to get those results.
Exactly.
Okay, and that sometimes is put back number 5 after all of the other discussion. Then you have to make sure it's cost effective.
Sure.
Okay, so you don't want to spend $4 million for something that isn't worth that much. Then nowadays in particular is the question of speed. If it's 1 quarter, 90 days is equal to a year. So we can't afford the $4 million projects that take a year, okay, because everything's changed. Then the other one is it really has to be people positive. Because sometimes the consulting assignments end up just cutting people or becoming intrusive. Then the other thing is it has to be simple enough so people can understand it and work with it, and it can have some sustainable benefits. So if you look at cost, speed, results, and how intrusive it is, how simple it is, if everyone uses that criteria and look back at your consulting engagements, either the ones that you performed as a consultant or the ones as a board member that you approved, did they get those results? And oftentimes it's no.
It's very unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate because it's all, one of my old mentors used to say, judge by results. So we're talking about results, not process. And if you judge by process, that's great, but it's not like the Olympic gymnastics where you just give them an 8 or a 6. You got to actually win and perform, and there's lots of pressure. So there's been quite a bit of disappointment. And even some of these consultants who are involved in change management strategy, they'll basically say that, hey, 75% of these projects don't work. But they don't tell you whether theirs is in the 75% or the 25%. So what you have to do is, like just buying any product and service, is you have to look at, well, what are the results that I want to achieve, and do we actually achieve those results in a cost-effective, fast way that had a positive impact on the people?
Exactly. So that's a great structure to work within to make sure that, again, the consultants know going in it's going to be performance-based and not just high, nice process with no results. With
no results. And there's been a lot of these complaints about the fad, the latest fad from, you went back historically, because we've all been through this, management by objectives, matrix management, the 1-minute manager, you can go on and on and on, change management, team building. But is it actually producing the results based on the criteria that I just provided you? So sometimes you just got to refocus and say, what do I want as a result of this, not the process.
And sustainable results, I guess.
And sustainable results. And so the other part is there's a lot of jargon out there, and this is particularly the middle, the middle market companies, where you get business owners that just want results. They don't want to get into the very sophisticated models and theories, and the consultants are talking about empowerment, paradigm shifts, all of these highfalutin words. And the business owner is just trying to keep things going, and he wants some direct help to have him achieve that in a cost-effective way.
So you would suggest, and I don't want to put words in your
Sure,
mouth,
go ahead.
again, knowing as a business owner, you know exactly what you feel like you need first, when you'd like to have it, and what it's going to involve to make that happen. So one consultant or a team may not come in and just start slashing people when you knew that your long-term plans may actually need those people. And it's important for the business owner to, I assume, to clearly communicate their expectations as well.
Yeah, but what you don't want to do, and it's like any person you hire, is that you don't want to get sucked into their process as the end product. What you want to make sure is that process results in what you want. Now, obviously, there's parts of it that you have to do, but once you get into that process, sometimes the consultants lose sight of that end result. So you got to keep focusing on that end result. So if you get too much process, too much jargon, too much fad, and then if you don't get, what have been the results? And almost every consultant may have one or two testimonies, that they have, but that's not enough. You have to be able to see how they do it, plus get some real endorsements to say they actually met that criteria.
And I'm sure that thins out the herd quite a bit.
It does.
Yes.
It does.
Great. And one of the questions we had too, which you sort of answered already, but can they prove their models? And
Yes.
so that's something that you'd certainly want to see. What types of organizations, Larry, have you been able to work with and help turn around? If you could give us an example or two.
Well, remember, my main expertise and experience is executive recruiting, and then working with consultants. So when I did my projects, they're fast because I didn't have time to build these long-term consulting arrangements. That's another thing that clients have to be aware of, is that the consultants are there to try to develop this long-term relationships and find other problems. So there's a constant new set of issues that come up that require more consulting help. This failed, that failed. So you got to be careful that you don't get sucked into a long-term relationship that's not producing results. But what I do is very quick, and we'll talk about it later, but it's been a lot for the banks and companies merging, nonprofits, some churches, ministries, even some government entities. Wherever you have a group that could be in a boardroom or a conference room that includes sometimes the investors, the board members, and the executives. So we have to figure out a way to get that whole group on the same page and produce results as quickly as possible. Because nowadays, it's not just the executive team. The executive team, if they're a public company, they're subjected to board oversight, and the board's subjected to shareholder or investor oversight. So there's a lot of things, even with government entities, there's funding, and with nonprofits, there's donors. So there's a whole series of people that have to buy into this to make it work.